Maximize Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. This is part two of our two-part series on attracting and retaining high-performing talent. And I'm going to welcome our guest, Mark Galvan, back with us in the hot seat again today. He's the founder and managing partner of ProForce, an employer branding and talent acquisition consulting firm based here in Dallas, Texas. Now, Mark is a 20-year veteran in the human resources outsourcing space. 9 of those years, he was at Accenture, where he served as the North American HR outsourcing lead, and he led a team of over 250 HR, payroll, and benefits professionals. Mark also received his Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt training at Accenture. But he's most excited about what he's been able to focus on for the last 8 years in the area of talent acquisition, disruption, employer branding, and talent attraction. So let me start with a quick recap of last week's podcast, which you can find wherever you found this one. By the way, if you haven't already done so, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to that episode first. Now, in it, we discussed consumer brand, which is the way other people perceive your product or services. Employer brand, which is about your company as an employer. Talent brand, which is your company's talent, capabilities, or people. And culture brand, about your company's culture or environment. Now, employer branding is core to talent attraction, and what we call the talent attraction model, which is different from talent recruiting. We also touched on the core elements of the paradigm shifts from talent recruiting to talent attraction, which Mark calls the 5 strategic shifts. And that is the subject of our conversation today. Although we touched on them last week, we're going to do a deep dive into these 5 strategic shifts today. So welcome back to Maximize Business Value, Mark.
Thank you, Tom. Real pleasure to be here and excited to see how this will add value to your audience.
Oh, I can't wait as well. So this is going to be an exciting conversation. So let's assume that our audience has already listened to last week's episode, and let's jump right in. First, why do you call these concepts shifts?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, if you look at what these 5 changes are in the standard approach, they are more than just a process change. They're not a process improvement. They are a paradigm shift. It's like going from one universe to another one. And because these shifts are so significant, they are very different from the status quo. And it's also different from what we intuitively have done. You know, some of this stuff has been ingrained in our corporate culture for decades, and we're challenging the status quo and thinking differently about how we approach this stuff. So collectively, that's why they make such a dramatic change.
Awesome. I love that. So we're not just saying tweak your processes. We're saying move from this universe to another universe. I like that analogy. Yeah. Well, let's begin with why. Why would this be so important to business owners and leaders in organizations?
Yeah, well, typically we have a business case for everything we do. A lot of times it's driven by something financial or strategic, and those are fine. However, when we look at talent and its impact on business, one of the things I say all the time is the level of the talent you're able to attract is the biggest predictor of future success. And if we understand that, then we know that the ability to attract talent is the single most important lever we have in business to attract the right people so that the things get done that we need to see done to be successful. So we can't underscore the importance of this element because it has an impact on all of the people you're able to bring into the organization.
I love that. So important to have a great people strategy, right? And these things are going to get there. Well, let's dive into the deep end and talk about the strategic shifts. We're going to tick them off today, and hopefully we'll have some examples as well. So what is the first shift?
Okay. First shift, create experiential constancy. And those words were selected very strategically. The first is create. It means you have an obligation to take ownership of what you're doing. You're intentionally, purposefully creating something. You're taking action. Experiential references the experience that the candidate goes through from all the way in the very beginning when they first see a job posting or they find your company online or they look at your career portal, all the way through the entire life cycle from beginning to end. Everything needs to be consistent. And that's the constancy word. Consistent in integrity, consistent in messaging across all channels. So we're communicating with people by web, by phone, by email, by text. All of these interactions, and sometimes different people, it's very challenging to create that experiential consistency or constancy. And here's why. The typical model in the larger the organization, the worse this is. You have a candidate that begins as a candidate, they then become an applicant, and then they become a contingent new hire. And they're in a holding phase until they have background checks and drug tests and other things done. And then they become a new hire, but they're really not an integrated employee until they get past their introductory or probationary period and they're trained and engaged and deployed. Okay, think about that. All of those are different people, different departments, different processes, different software, different process owners, different performance metrics. So the chances of complete inconsistency is very high. And the problem that creates is high performers, if they don't feel a consistent process, which creates a sense of integrity, they disengage. Because the high performers, they're not looking for just a job. They're looking for an opportunity that's as good as them. So they're evaluating the company based on their experience. And if the company fails to deliver experiential constancy, the high performers, they don't even apply. They're not even in the applicant pool.
Yeah, that's a real challenge because if you don't do that, right, if you don't create that consistency, they're either not going to be in that pool to start with, or they're going to self-eliminate.
Yes.
And that's the challenge, right? I mean, we want the high performers, but many businesses that don't do this, maybe eliminating those performers before they even have an opportunity to come in and apply for a job. So can you give us a practical example of what this looks like when it's deployed?
Yeah, a good example is we were approached by a future client that then became a client about a year and a half ago that was looking at winning a large contract. They knew that if they won that contract, they were going to then have to staff up, and recruiting would be under pressure to find, all the levels of positions to fill. I mean, we're talking about scores or dozens of positions. Now, this company, Logisticorp, based out of Dallas here, was and is in the supply chain, warehouse operations, transportation industry, a very challenging industry, but by anybody's standards. But now they are faced with this: how do we ramp up? Now, it was because the leadership had the foresight to say, we're not prepared for this tsunami of talent demand. We need to get our house in order and rethink how we're presenting ourselves to people, because we can't afford to lose the incumbents, and we can't afford to compromise our ability to backfill all the roles that are going to be open once the contract is awarded. Okay, so that's a lot of forethought. And what we did is we had a few months in advance to put up a revision to the website, a candidate portal with all kinds of information for the candidate to improve the candidate experience. We changed all the communication that goes out to the candidates. We changed how the job postings look. We converted the job postings into something that looks like more like a brochure or a position profile. It's the kind of thing that you would expect if you were a target of an executive headhunter. You would have this VIP treatment. Well, we automated all of that and we created a candidate experience. And the timing was perfect because I got a call one day that they had won the contract, and within a week they needed to fill like 35 positions. And we were able to help them accomplish that. But it was because all that was done in advance. Because, the thing is, when you compare the existing model that we have today versus that adjustment, it's extraordinary. Because the same way a recruiter is looking to disqualify people in a process, the candidates are looking to disqualify the company. And so if we can control that experience, we win their hearts and we win the opportunity to have them on board our organization. So, that's a real practical example, but it had to do with, touching every part of the candidate experience.
I love that because that's not only a great example of solving that challenge for them, but it's also an example that I want to highlight here that many small business owners don't think about. Your client or your prospective client at the time, which has since become your client, had already thought through, we have a fairly decent chance of winning this future opportunity, and we're going to need the staff in order to fulfill our agreement, right? An anticipated agreement. So many times small businesses don't think about hiring new people until they need them. And in my opinion, it's too late, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so it's about being intentional in advance and creating this experience so that you have potentially a pipeline of folks when you need them. It's just like exit strategies. Most business owners don't think about their exit strategy until it's too late to do something about it. So I love that example. And I think it was a perfect example of business owners should understand what their capacity is, what opportunities are coming so that they can prepare in advance. Great example. Let's go to number 2. What is the second shift?
The second is lead with two-way authentic communication. Now, originally, we had that set up as create two-way authentic communication with the focus on authentic, but we modified that over the years to lead. You as a business take the responsibility to lead with very authentic conversation with your candidate and your applicants. And the reason we want this is because we want the candidates to reciprocate. We want them to come back with authentic, transparent conversation with us about who they are so that we can make the right choices. If they're lying, then they're not giving us authentic information and we're not able to make good decisions. So, look at the typical scenario today. Hello, candidates lie on their resume, right? No surprise there.
Yeah, they candidates will lie on their resume.
So the Society for Human Resources Management, they had this survey they did a couple of years ago, and it was like 85% of HR professionals say, yeah, we've uncovered lies on resumes. Okay, I think the other 15% were probably just unreachable. 75%, according to Career Builder, of managers say they found lies on resumes. Okay, so no surprise here. The problem is employers have a resume also. Everything you're putting out publicly, everything you're communicating is your resume. It's who you are as a business. And typically companies only deliver information as needed. if you look at the typical recruiting process, the recruiters are asking questions of the candidates. And the problem there is companies try to hide information they don't want people to see. But in reality, it's all public anyway. I mean, look at the internet. The candidates can go find out what type of coffee you have in your coffee room. No, seriously, it's on the employee comments in Indeed and on Glassdoor. They can find out the entire professional history of the hiring manager because it's on LinkedIn. They can find out the political party of the CEO because it's all public, their contributions. They can find out dirt from the past because all the lawsuits, all the employee comments, all the former employees that were disgruntled that got fired. So, hey, what could possibly go wrong, right, in this scenario? So the best metaphor I've got is, look, it's like dating. If you're lying to your date and they're lying to you, it's only going to go bad. It may not go bad immediately, but you don't want a divorce down the road because you were inauthentic with each other from day one. Well, in the same way, we don't want candidates to quit after 6 months because, it was not genuine. It was not authentic. They were deceived. And this happens all the time. So, after making this shift, it's huge. The difference is a paradigm shift. It's a totally different universe because what's happening now is you have a very genuine dialogue and you're open and honest with each other. Now, I would argue that most recruiters can't even do some of this stuff because they don't have conviction about their own companies. So, companies that get this right, they have a high level of trust that's built with their people from the very beginning. And that just creates a huge level of commitment from day one. It's amazing.
Can you give us an example of what this looks like?
Yeah, we had a situation where we were invited in to work with a company, Meyerhofer Electric. They are operational in all over the state of Texas, multiple offices. They're a commercial contractor for electrical engineering. And what they had was a situation where they were trying to attract people. This is the common root cause. We're having problems recruiting. No, you're not. You're having problems attracting people. Okay. So let's reframe that from the beginning. Well, what we looked at them and said is you have a story that is not part of your communication. They had a scenario where they were behind the scenes building a new building and leadership was distracted and focused on building this new facility. And nowhere is that information communicated, nor is it public. But what we found out is that they were building this new building because they had multiple locations and their employee base was spread out all over. And they have a real strong commitment to creating a family environment. So they wanted to literally invest in a building so that they could bring everybody together to create a stronger culture. It's like, who does that? Especially for a small to mid-sized company to invest like that in your employee culture. So we took that and we said, that needs to be part of your story. They didn't want to necessarily share it, but we said, no, that's the kind of thing that resonates with the right person. So we built that into their story. And it was actually a part of their job descriptions, where you have, about the company. No, not that sterile HR approved stuff that, is past legal. This is a conversation that's authentic about who the business is. And what they found is that was able to help them attract people that wanted to work in that family environment where there was strong culture and huge, long commitment that leads to longevity. And every company's got something like that they need to be transparent about.
A lot of times business owners feel like they need to hold their cards closer to their chest, but
yes,
I'm not. I'm exactly the opposite. Anytime that I have bought or sold a company, and our listeners know that I have bought or sold 100 businesses in my career, 100 transactions. And on day one, always, after I've acquired a business, I walk in and announce to the employees that I'm not going to be the last owner of this business. And so I talk to them about what my exit strategy is from the beginning.
Wow.
And because if they can help me achieve the results, they'll win as well, right? In that transaction. And so, and I've been able to do that over and over again, but it's that transparency that I have. But now I'm hearing perhaps I wasn't even as transparent as I should have been. Those kind of things. We're a growing company. We're acquiring businesses that might be attractive to the right candidates, right? In some of our businesses. And so, so I love that. I love owner transparency as much as possible. Many business owners create in their own mind a scenario that if they're transparent, that it's going to drive people away. But the reality is people crave information. Right? They do. And if they're armed with good information, then they can even be more enthusiastic about the business. And so I love that second shift, two-way authentic communication. All right,
leading with it.
Yes,
so the business has to initiate it so that the candidate reciprocates. Because it's again, you go back to that dating metaphor. When you're transparent and authentic, it invites a genuine conversation that's very unique.
Yeah, that is awesomeness. All right, what's number 3?
Okay, so the third shift is use the secret weapon in your talent attraction model. And the secret weapon is candidate persona marketing. Now, this is literally the most powerful tool in the toolbox as part of a talent attraction program, because what it does is it helps tailor the messaging and the communication to the ideal audience so that you're able to attract those high performing people that are also the right cultural fit. And that's a key. The typical business today is, I think we mentioned it in our last episode, they have the post and pray method of recruiting talent. It's like we post all this stuff, and it's actually gotten worse. There's now social media. We got to post online and social media. We have to have our Facebook and our Instagram and our LinkedIn accounts completely updated. And we've got to have Twitter messages every day. And that's not necessarily getting the result that you're looking for. And then we've got technology companies that are bringing in technical solutions. I call them point solutions. They solve for individual symptoms, but they don't address the root cause. So, we've got calls coming in all the time from organizations that have a technical solution for us. Recruiting is saying, look, we can't find people. We got to increase our pay, or we've got to add benefits. We're doing all these things to try to attract people, but it's not necessarily working. A lot of what it does is it creates a lot of noise. Businesses are familiar with posting a job and having hundreds of people apply. Well, that just creates an enormous amount of work. You don't even know if the right candidate is in there. What if you knew from the beginning that your top candidate didn't even apply because they weren't attracted to your business? And now you're facing 100 applications, and you have fiduciary responsibility and legal obligation to even keep those records. You just created a bunch of waste, 100% waste for your organization. Okay, so I can't underscore the damaging impact, and it's all hidden below the covers because we've been doing this stuff forever the same way. So when we're able to attract the right people, it's life changing, because these are people, again, they're not looking for a job, they're looking for an opportunity.
You mentioned this yesterday, and of course, in the presentation that I saw at Business Navigators, candidate persona. That was a light bulb moment for me. Many businesses take the time to define who their ideal customer and what they like, the customer persona, but when it comes to hiring people, the persona is these qualifications, right? Well, that's wrong. It's not enough. So let's dig a little deeper into this. And why do you call this the most powerful tool in the toolbox?
Yeah, well, when you contrast what we're doing traditionally today in the marketplace versus what happens after making this shift, first of all, we're able to deliver very exclusive information based on our candidate avatar. You compared it to marketing. It is the exact same thing. We've borrowed the concept from sales and marketing. So if you look at the last generation or two, marketing was advertising on a newspaper. It was just shotgun, throw it all out there. And we knew that 99% of people weren't going to get it, weren't going to read it, weren't going to be interested. And, we're hoping for that 1%. Today, we don't do that. We have very targeted advertising models where we're able to refine, I want this demographic, this age group, this background, these interests in this zip code, right? I mean, that's what we do. Well, when we apply that same kind of thinking to recruiting, we're able to not only deliver exclusive information, but we can also provide information that is transparent about the opportunity because we know what is going to be of interest to them. We can also request information and we can get back information that maybe wouldn't have been disclosed otherwise. And we can also then use that information to rate and rank people. That's a very, very different approach. So this it's not just a communication strategy. It's how we communicate. And it really impacts everything. So you see it show up in outbound messaging, job descriptions, your total rewards, what's on your career portal. So when we see it as the methodology behind how we communicate, we see that it's like chemistry. In the dating metaphor, again, I'll go back to that. Because it targets the right person, that person feels like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for an opportunity like this. Or how did you know? I mean, when you start hearing those things from candidates, we get thank you letters from candidates that are not even selected for jobs because of the way we made them feel and the way we connected with them in the process. It's extraordinary. And that's really why this is the secret weapon. Again, 10 to 15% of companies are using this stuff. So if you're a company that's using it, you have extraordinary competitive advantage.
I love the way you're tying this all together, the persona, and it ties to the communication, the leading with communication, consistency, all of these shifts are sort of bound up together. I suppose you could do one or another and achieve some level of results, but these things are a holistic approach. And I thank you for kind of weaving that fabric. Before we take a quick break, why don't you give us an example of where you've used the secret weapon?
Okay, so every company is different. And every company has, again, their own target ideal candidate. Most have not taken time to really think this through. But what comes to mind is an example of a client we had that was an oil and gas company, a performance pulsation control. They manufacture large, heavy-duty equipment for the oil and gas industry. And as we're doing our due diligence, discovering who they are, one of the things that we found out is they had a culture that was based on the faith of their owners. And what we said is, that's really unique. How important is that to you? And it's like, whoa, that's really super important. Matter of fact, we have a nonprofit organization. We fund it, and it actually helps employees in crisis when they have a problem. And when there's no internal needs, we look to the community to serve the community. Our faith drives how we treat our customers, our vendors, our candidates, our employees. I'm like, that needs to be part of the messaging, because when we're communicating that up front, when we're letting people know, look, this is a faith-based culture. It's not a nonprofit organization, but you got to understand that the owners have very high standards of themselves based on biblical principles, for example, in this case. And you don't have to believe the same thing, obviously, but you got to know that you're coming into a culture with high standards of ethics and integrity, and it's based on a faith that the owners have. And so you're going to be expected to at least, achieve and perform at a level that's consistent with those standards of integrity. Okay, all of a sudden, you've got people on the other side of that communication saying, oh my heavens, I would love to work for a company like that. What do I need to do? Okay, so instead of trying to recruit people, drag them into the company, convince them, throw money at them, we've got people that they're willing to take a pay cut to get into work for a company like that. Okay, paradigm shift. I had a CEO of a technology company tell me last month, Mark, I have never, ever been in this situation in my entire career where we're not trying to convince people to come in. We actually have the choice of multiple people, and we're having a hard time picking the best one. Paradigm shift.
That's awesome. I mean, how many companies have the opportunity to do that? It's almost turning the tables, trying to talk them out of it.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I just got a message yesterday, and I'm passing it on to our recruiting team, that we've got to let a bunch of candidates know they didn't get the job. And they're going to be disappointed because they were all fighting for the opportunity. When they found out about the company and the organization, the culture, they wanted in. And the company picked the very best person. They picked a second best also to be a 1099 contractor on a project basis, to kind of have a relationship with them and have them in the wings for the next hiring opportunity. But everybody else is going to be disappointed. And so we treat them like VIPs. We even give them career counseling and coaching advice for their job transition efforts when we give them the bad news. It's all built into the process.
Wow, that is awesome. I am so thankful that you said you let the candidates know that aren't, too frequently, especially in small businesses where they've interviewed, let's call it a half a dozen candidates for a position, and they settle on one, and that's the last thing the other candidates hear is the interview, and there's no communication. Right. I've always made a practice of letting candidates know that when we've selected a different candidate, and especially keeping that communication open. If they were a good candidate that I might have a position for later, right? Because if you disappear after the interview and then you try to come back, and let's say 3 months later, you're trying to hire for a similar position, you go, that person will be excellent, and you haven't communicated with them. Well, now it's to use the dating analogy, it's you didn't call the girl back, until 3 months. Hey, remember that great date we had? Let's go on that one again, right?
So, this is exacerbated by the fact that these candidates can go online and publish information about their candidate experience, even though you didn't hire them.
Yes. We are in a culture where there is lots of information and lots of ways to communicate that. Well, look, we're up against a break. We're talking with Mark Galvan. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Every business will eventually transition, some internally to employees and managers, and some externally to third-party buyers. Mastery Partners equips business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their businesses on their terms using our 4-step process. We start with a snapshot of where your business is today. Then we help you understand where you want to be and design a custom strategy to get you there. Next, we help you execute that strategy with the assistance of our amazing resource network. And ultimately, you'll be able to transition your business on your terms. What are you waiting for? More time? More revenue? If you want to maximize your business value, it takes time. Now is that time. Get started today by checking us out at www.masterypartners.com or email us at info@masterypartners.com to learn more.
We're back with Mark Galvan, founder and managing partner of ProForce, and we're talking about the 5 paradigm shifts required to attract and retain the very best talent on the planet. We've already covered the first 3 shifts in the first half of this program. Let's jump into shift 4. So, Mark, what is shift 4?
Shift 4 is implement, control, and containment. So, perfect segue from what we were just talking about, where information goes online and candidates can post information. Control and containment is literally a commitment to protect your online brand and reputation. It's based on a lean operations principle that says you want to identify any problem that could negatively impact your customer, and you want to have mitigation strategy and a practical plan to eliminate any possible negative impact on your customer. So in this case, the candidate is the customer. And we know that if a great candidate goes online and sees a bunch of bad information, the great candidates, the best candidates, are always the ones that exercise the most due diligence. They always do their homework. They disengage from the process. So when we do this, we're controlling what the candidate experiences before they ever show up in the applicant pool. And so this is a very powerful application of an operational excellence principle in a marketing strategy applied to recruitment. So this is part of the reason why this is complex, and you don't see this delivered in most operational environments.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Do you have an example that like is a before and after scenario that will help us kind of visualize how this works in the real world?
Yeah, well, okay. So the typical business model is set up this way. When you're shopping for goods or services, I mean, what do you do? What do I do? All of your listeners, we go online and we look for, is it 4 stars, 5 stars? We're looking for reviews. We do that for almost everything nowadays. And, you go to Yelp to look at, if a restaurant's good, but a candidate is going online to look at if the company's good. So they're shopping the same way we're shopping for goods and services. I was on Amazon a couple of days ago, and I do what I always do. I sort by customer review, and then I scroll to the very bottom. And if there's a bunch of negative comments, I completely eliminate that product option. The candidates are doing the same thing about their employers. So, and the stats are really disturbing on this. If you look at what's happening right now, 84% of job seekers, I'm going to refer to some stats here real quick. 84% of job seekers say they wouldn't even apply to a company that has a bad reputation. 86% of women, 67% of men wouldn't even go through with the process. 69% wouldn't accept a job with a company that had a bad reputation. 95%, this is extraordinary, 95% of job seekers say that negative reviews significantly impact their perception of the company. And 50% say they wouldn't even work for a company. Matter of fact, they would take a pay decrease to avoid working for a company like that. So it gets worse. 92% of people say in online surveys that they would consider leaving their current company to go work for another company that has a better reputation. Okay, so hello, that means that you've got the majority of your current employee population that is maybe not actively looking. We know some of them are always, but they would be open to it if approached by the right opportunity. So think about it. Once you make this shift and you're controlling, all the information that's out there so that the candidates are experiencing positive things, they're seeing positive reviews, they're getting social reinforcement. It's social proof in the marketing arena. It's the same in the recruiting and the talent attraction arena. Once they get that, all of a sudden, if you're the company that has the great reputation and you're controlling this stuff, you have the ability to steal anybody you want. I mean, that's the bottom line.
And that happens frequently, right? Your best players,
absolutely,
always your best employees are always targets for other companies. And so you might have the opportunity to turn the tables and do the same thing if you manage this stuff.
So I want to interject one more thing, because we talked about the first 3 shifts. And for someone out there that's thinking, wow, that's a great idea, you can't take any one of these shifts and implement it individually and think you have done something or accomplished something. The reason why is, we've referred to this before, this is the talent supply chain. It's an excellent metaphor, because your ability to attract talent is based on the strength of your talent supply chain, which is determined by your weakest link.
Wow. Talent supply chain.
Where does the chain break? It breaks at the weakest link. So if you've got all of the right stuff, but you have not controlled the online noise about your business, the weakest link, the candidates aren't even in the applicant pool.
Yeah. Wow. And it's not particularly difficult, but it is a little bit time consuming to do, right? And if you let your online reputation get out of control, it's very difficult to repair. So I'm sure your company has some great strategies to be able to do that. We won't get into those details now. Let's move on to the fifth shift.
Sure.
What is number 5?
Leverage the right expertise. So there's a lot of complexity in this stuff. And literally, I've been in the HR, talent, outsourcing, operational excellence environment for 20 plus years. And the last 8 or 9 years have been exclusively focused on this talent attraction set of best practices and strategies. So a combination of looking at what large companies are doing as the early pioneers and testing with our clients and proving what are the core elements of a talent attraction model means that it takes a long time to develop the right expertise. So there are other people out there. There's consultants. There's people that have worked for, the large global brands where they've been through this stuff. They know these terms. They know these concepts. So, if you believe that getting the best people is important, and I would argue that it is, because your ability to attract quality people is the best predictor of future success, then your employer brand and your talent attraction strategy are literally the single biggest lever you have to attract people. Real quick, I was at breakfast with Jim Collins in San Diego sometime back. He's the author of Good to Great, popular business book. And I had a chance to ask him one-on-one, hey, Jim, the model you have in the book is great. You've got all these characteristics of what it takes to have high-performing, long-standing, sustaining, successful businesses. But what's the one thing that if you get it wrong, it's like the weak link in the chain? The whole thing is messed up. And he thought about it and he said, well, there is one thing. And I said, well, you didn't call that out in the book. And he said, no, I didn't. I said, well, what is it? He said, 80% of your key roles must be filled with the right people. If you miss that one thing, then all of the other things around technology accelerators and right people on the bus and the right seat on the bus, all that stuff doesn't matter. If you miss the point that 80% of your key roles must be filled with the right people. So, for an organization that's looking at, how do we do this? How do we take advantage of a time right now when our competition isn't doing these things? You have choices, but it's you got to have the right people involved in the heavy lifting to be able to enable this stuff for your organization.
I can confirm that myself. The 80% of the right people and the leadership. I've had teams where I haven't had that, and those businesses always underperform. And I hadn't really thought about that kind of being the litmus test. But I can tell you that when I've had teams that were 100% the right people, you can't even stop those businesses. I mean, it's like a freight train barreling.
That reminds me of an analogy I use sometimes where the Chicago Bulls during their dynasty period, where they were like the champions for years, unstoppable. The reason why was so simple. They had the right person in all 5 of their key positions. Every single person was a rock star in their role. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they were unstoppable. Yeah. Same thing happens in businesses. That is a great analogy. Look, for organizations that sort of have an internal team of folks that are responsible for HR, recruiting, other things, all of those things, can't they just implement now that we've kind of peeled back the onion, can't they just implement these strategies internally?
Potentially. I think the organization, executive leadership, and executive champion needs to determine if the internal resources have the expertise and the capacity, because there's a bunch of landmines that you can hit along the way. I used this example in the last conversation we had that doing it yourself is kind of like a DIY surgery, where it just is really messy and really, really painful, really expensive. I mean, it just costs more in the long run. With an organization, you've got all these internal blind spots. I mean, there's tactical knowledge on how to pull this stuff off, industry, strategic experience, You've got past practice that you're fighting against, right? I mean, there's status quo as a form of resistance. You have existing procedures, all this stuff is out of the box. It's not safe to violate the status quo. You have people that are being evaluated on performance metrics and they don't want to mess that up. There's also lack of ownership. It's like, we mentioned this in the last conversation. Who's really accountable? Talent acquisition, HR, branding, marketing, the web development team, office of the CEO. They're all, touching their nose saying, not me, at the conference table, because there's, no single owner, value stream owner for this talent supply chain. It's a problem. Another is conflicts of interest. Budgets prevent things from happening. Existing team mindset. I mean, there's all these obstacles. So those are things you just have to be attentive to. When you have the right people, though, you'll know it, because they're going to have prior experience. They're going to have the expertise, the knowledge, and the talent. They're going to have a teaming strategy to be able to bring in all these different players and bring them together. And they're also going to have the ability to quickly implement these things because they've done it before. They have the tools. So that's how you know you got the right team.
Great. Yeah, it's the same thing with anything else. Certainly you could buy books and go out and self-implement. I've just seen in my own experience that when I hire a professional that knows how to do something that I am attempting to do, that the implementation is faster, smoother, and the outcomes are always way better than me trying to self-implement. Great examples of that would be, EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Certainly you could buy the book Traction and go out and implement that on your own, but it always goes better, faster, smoother if you hire somebody to do that alongside of you, a professional that knows that. Same thing that we do with our exit strategies. Certainly a business owner is within his right to go out and define this on his own, but it's always helpful to understand where those blind spots are and all those other things. So I agree. I think that you can do it, but I think it'll be a lot better and smoother if you engage with a company like yours, ProForce, to help implement that. Let's just real quick recap. What are the 5? Just run them down for us. What are the 5 paradigm shifts again?
Create experiential constancy, lead with two-way authentic communication, use the secret weapon, candidate persona marketing, implement control and containment, and leverage the right expertise.
Great 5 paradigm shifts for the folks in our audience that are listening and they feel like they may need to reevaluate their own talent acquisition strategy. What would you recommend as the next step?
Yeah, first, probably just realize that you're facing a decision right now. I mean, you're at a crossroads after hearing this information. You can do nothing, which is a choice. I mean, that's a choice. And sometimes the cost of inaction is the most expensive one. Or you can evaluate how you can approach some level of transformation within your own organization, either by leveraging your internal team, hiring an external consultant, or bringing in a full-time employee to just own the whole thing going forward if they've done it for another organization already. But again, realize that sometimes not doing anything. I used to do cost accounting in my prior life decades ago, and the indirect cost will kill you. the stuff that you're not paying attention to, it's out there and it's killing your profit, to be sure. But most importantly, I would say take advantage of the resources that we're going to provide with this interview. There's some tools and some downloads, and then also take advantage of a no obligation conversation with us. I mean, we're happy to spend, an hour with you on the phone and dig deeply into, what's going on. Take a look at who you are online. I guarantee that conversation, 1 hour, will give you insights that you have never, ever, ever heard from your internal teams before. And you'll see blind spots you've never, ever been exposed to.
And how much are you going to charge our audience for this 1 hour consultation, Mark?
Oh, that's complimentary for friends that are friends of your organization. It's something that we're happy to be able to do.
That's awesome. I know you do that for everybody, but be sure if you call Mark that you mentioned that you heard about it on the Maximize Business Value podcast. Well, as we wrap up here, I've got a few cleanup questions. This has just been spectacular. One last question that I ask all of our guests, though, and Mark, it's this. This podcast is all about maximizing business value. What is the one most important thing you recommend a business owner do to build long-term sustainable value in their business?
We've heard about golden handcuffs, where the business gets purchased, but they don't want to let the senior executive or the owner go because they have tribal knowledge, legacy knowledge, client relationships, whatever. That is something that has to be eliminated. And I would recommend that you draw a line, a horizontal line across your org chart, somewhere between the owner and your supervisor level, and say everybody above that line is dispensable. And because we have process, we have procedure, we have automation, we have poka-yoke, the ability to prevent errors in the internal execution of our work, because we've transformed that executive layer of our business. It can be sold, it can be jettisoned without compromising performance.
That's brilliant. This is episode, what did I say, 81, I think, and I haven't heard that before. But yes, no one's ever suggested to eliminate those handcuffs. If you've documented your processes properly, if you've got proper training in place, every single person in the organization should be dispensable, as you use it. I say replaceable. And so that is a brilliant answer to that question, but I'm not going to let you off the hook there. I've got to ask you the one last question that, our listeners who have now powered through 2 whole podcasts, and they've been anxious to hear the answer to this last question that I always ask. Our bonus question for you, Mark, is what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years?
I'm laughing because I'm now challenged to be transparent and authentic. Honestly, it's being a little too detail oriented, a little too perfectionistic at times. One of the things that clients and organizations see when they work with us is, oh my gosh, the level of detail is overwhelming, and it almost is suffocating sometimes. Well, we're in the details, and sometimes I'm guilty of making it a little too complex. Especially at the level of, your audience, probably, we want to know the strategy. We want to know the high level process map. We don't need that level of detail. But I love this stuff. I'm in the weeds because I'm an innovator. I've been, focused on, everything that can be done at a very detailed level to improve, our clients' ability to attract people. And I'm doing what I am passionate about. So it's hard to resist being so detail oriented.
I can sure tell that you are passionate about what you do, and I'm so thankful you are. Our listeners have been able to benefit from this. So let's remind them how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, our website is the best way, proforceco.com, proforceco.com, proforceco.com.
I love that. Very easy, very concise. Mark, thank you for taking so much time to educate our viewers and listeners. Thank you for the time on this podcast.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate this. This is a lot of fun.
You can find Mark Galvan at proforceco.com, or you can always find him on LinkedIn. And of course, as always, you can just reach out to me, and I will be happy to make a warm introduction to my good friend. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in their businesses. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this podcast, won't you? Add your comments. We love your comments and your ideas for future podcasts. Tell us one thing that you want to learn more about to maximize business value, and I promise we will find a way to cover it in a future podcast. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to implement the 5 paradigm shifts in your business while you maximize business value.
thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.